The Alliance's Executive Director, Tom Stebbins. You are back on Capitol Tonight. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Okay, so before we get into the specifics of this specific case, this case is not alone.
No, it's one of many in a long history of food-related lawsuits. Probably most infamously, the McDonald's hot coffee case from a long time ago. And that case really launched 1,000 lawsuits. Since then, I believe over 800 hot beverage related lawsuits are filed every year.
And it's because of that case that there's a label that says, caution, the beverage you are about to enjoy is hot.
Is hot. Coffee is hot.
Right.
Newsflash.
Right.
But those cases are real, and they're not just against people like McDonald's. They're also against small businesses, cafes. Southwest Airlines was hit with a hot beverage case last year. So they really run the gamut, these lawsuits, and they increase in frequency when they win. So last year, for example, there was a case against the makers of Nutella, which is a chocolate spread and not particularly healthy for you. But one woman thought that, well, this must be healthy. It has chocolate in it and must be healthy for me. And so she sued and she won $4 million. And for people like you and I, we can get our $4 back because apparently we thought that Nutella was also healthy for us. But for the lawyer, he'll get over $1 million.
Okay, so the facts of this particular case are, it's a $5 million suit.
That's correct.
And it's about corn syrup. And the idea is that corn syrup contributed to the illness of this girl.
That's correct.
So may have a lot of other products. Is that the argument that you guys are saying, well, it could be sugar, it could be soda, it could be not just corn syrup, it could have been a lot of things? Sure.
I mean, there's no really scientific basis behind the high fructose corn syrup versus sugar. It's not particularly different from sugar. I don't think, for example, Paula Deen puts a lot of high fructose corn syrup in her
She might not be your best bet right now.
Probably not today is a good day. But,
Go
there's certainly ways that people can get this, and it doesn't necessarily just have to do with high fructose corn syrup. And if you're concerned about that, eat less of it. If you know that these kinds of things are going to be unhealthy for you, fat, calories, those kinds of things, I mean, we know what they are, and I think people need to take a certain amount of responsibility for them.
Okay, so the question then is, does a manufacturer bear any responsibility at all? For example, we do put a warning label on cigarettes.
Sure.
Everybody knows that cigarettes are bad for you, and yet there's a warning label that really drives it home. Some of them are graphic. It depends on where you are. Mayor Bloomberg has, waged this war against salt and trans fat with varying degrees of success, et cetera. So does the industry have any responsibility at all, or should we just say it's a free market society and, inform yourself and that's your responsibility?
Well, everything's bad for you if you ingest too much of it. You could eat as much kale as you possibly could, and if you ate that much kale, it eventually would be bad for you. I think at a certain point, consumers have to take some responsibility for what they put in their bodies, because everything can be bad for you if you take too much of it, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or whether it's granola.
Well, but the counter argument to that is that the average consumer doesn't get tax breaks or incentives to create a product, right? I mean, corn syrup, the corn industry has a lot of incentives and gets a lot of breaks, particularly at the federal level, to create a product that people say, well, that's not good for you. And so maybe they have a responsibility at the product end to inform us just how dangerous the product could be if consumed in large or small amounts.
Well, it goes back to the Nutella case. I mean, we know that chocolate is not particularly good for us. We know that as consumers, and we know we shouldn't be eating.
I think it has a lot of antioxidants, is what we've been told.
Yeah, it does. Dark chocolate can be good for you, can be bad for you, and every year, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes apples are good for you, sometimes apples are bad for you, and that's why one of the things we need to do in New York is pass better standards for our court system. So right now in New York, our expert witness laws say that our expert witnesses need to be widely accepted. And we actually would rather going to the standard that the other states go to, which is scientifically verifiable. So it sounds kind of esoteric, but widely accepted in a court of law can be almost anything, and it can really capitalize on public paranoia. Whereas scientifically verifiable is a very different standard.
But one person's science is another person's junk science, right? I mean, where's the standard for that?
Well, that's why we need to have at least some science. Right now, the widely accepted could be any sort of scientific, not even scientific. It allows for non-science in the courtrooms.
Are we experiencing an increase in these? I mean, is the approach, the quote-unquote nanny state approach that Bloomberg and some other elected officials have taken to try and save us from ourselves, if you will,
right.
Is that approach be getting more lawsuits?
Well, it does. It does provide credence to lawsuits that may not have any scientific basis otherwise. So in a court of law, the plaintiff's attorney may say something to the effect of, well, there's no science behind this, but if that's true, then why is New York trying to ban it? If it's so healthy, why is New York trying to ban it? So even without the science, they can use some of these regulations put forth by politicians to provide credence to the lawsuit.
Is this Buffalo case particularly onerous in some way, or is it just one more in a sort of long line of the Nutella case or the beverage case from McDonald's or any other number of cases that people have seen over the course of time?
Well, it's probably going to line up to be a class action case. So right now it's one particular case, but if that wins, you will immediately see a class action case. And it's the class actions that can really do the most damage. For example, in this area, ticks and Lyme disease are a big issue. There was a vaccine created, and before we could even really get through testing it, there was already a line out the door for a class action lawsuit. So a lot of times these lawsuits can really hurt public health rather than help it.
So what would you do then? I mean, we do have a situation in society where we happen to be rather litigious as a country, but
Sure.
It is a country in which you have the freedom and the ability to do that. Now, you may say that there are lawyers who are making $1 million on a class action or preying on people's sensibility and playing into their fear. But nevertheless, I mean, that's part of what we're founded on, the freedom to go ahead and do this. I mean, any effort in the past to curb a person's right to sue has been fought rather hard, if I remember correctly, by the trial lawyers.
Sure, absolutely. And I think one thing that's important to note is that New York is particularly litigious. We are one of the most litigious states in the most litigious country in the world. And part of the reason for that is the influence of the trial lawyers who fight these sorts of things, who fight scientifically verifiable evidence rather than widely accepted, which is what they prefer. And we are really behind in all the other states in terms of our ability to kind of have equal access for both sides, which we don't really have right now.
Well, but what they would say, likely to counter that argument, is, well, what you want to do is protect big business and curb the rights of small consumers to sue and get their day in court.
Well, I believe that people have the right to sue, and if you're injured and somebody injured you, then you have the right to sue. But if you are going to try to sue, for example, for Nutella, saying that it's widely accepted that Nutella is a dangerous product.
Well, a jury found that to be a credible argument, apparently.
Sure, but that's because the jury was listening to experts that were not really verified. Whereas if we follow the other states and have scientifically verifiable experts in our courtrooms, the juries are going to hear better evidence.
I did want to ask you also just one thing that sort of spins off of this, and that is, if in fact we are more litigious as a state, it means that we have more of a backlog. And we also have a court system that has not received more funding this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So how big of a problem is that?
Well, we certainly support more funding for our court system. We support more funding for juries. We believe that we supported pay raises for our judges. We believe in a stronger court system. And what we don't believe in is a court system that just doles out payouts to trial attorneys, which is obviously what the trial lawyers support.
Is there a timeline on this Buffalo case?
I don't know what the timeline is right now. We'll keep tracking it as we track lots of lawsuits in our newsletter every week. We cover literally dozens of these every month, these kinds of cases, and they never seem to go away in New York.
Indeed, and perhaps they're even increasing. Well, we are also at YNN reporting on this particular case. I thank you very much, Tom, for coming
Great.
in.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's good to see you.